Hey everyone, I'm Mono Scaling here to guide you today. If you use this video to drift off to sleep, please tap like, hit subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now, get comfortable and relax. My name is Daniel Brown, and I need to write this down while I can still remember it clearly. While I still remember myself clearly. 3 weeks ago, my girlfriend Maya and I drove our RV to Ocala National Forest in Central Florida. We'd been planning the trip for months, a full week off the grid, just the two of us, trying to salvage what was left of a relationship that had been slowly crumbling for the better part of a year. Maya worked 60-hour weeks at a law firm in Jacksonville, and I'd been between jobs since my company downsized in March. The dynamic had shifted. I could feel her looking at me differently, like I was a project she was too tired to fix. The RV was a 2015 Winnebago we'd bought used the previous summer, 26 feet, barely broken in, with a full kitchen and a bathroom that worked most of the time. We'd taken it out twice before, once to the Keys, once to Savannah, but this was supposed to be different. This was supposed to be healing. We arrived at the campground on a Tuesday afternoon. The place was called Juniper Springs Recreation Area, tucked deep in the forest off Highway 40. The woman at the check-in booth was maybe 60, with sun-damaged skin and a voice like gravel. She handed us a map and circled our spot in red pen. Site 14, she said. Back near the creek. Pretty isolated this time of year. Perfect, Maya said, forcing a smile. The woman looked at me, then back at Maya. Cell service is spotty. Emergency phones by the bathhouse if you need it. We thanked her and drove in. The road turned to gravel, then dirt. Spanish moss hung from the live oaks like rotting curtains, and the deeper we went, the darker it got despite the afternoon sun. Site 14 was exactly as advertised. Isolated. The nearest RV was probably a quarter-mile back, and the only sounds were cicadas and the distant gurgle of the creek. Maya got out first, stretching her arms above her head. This is nice. I nodded, though something about the place felt off. Not dangerous exactly, just wrong, in a way I couldn't articulate. Like the forest was watching us set up camp. We spent the first 2 days trying to pretend everything was fine. We hiked a trail to a spring, swam in water so clear you could see the limestone bottom 20 feet down. We cooked steaks on the portable grill and drank wine from plastic cups. At night, we lay in bed and listened to the sounds outside. Owls, rustling leaves, the occasional crack of a branch. But we didn't talk. Not really. Every conversation felt like a negotiation. On the third day, things started to get strange. It was just after dawn when I woke to the sound of my phone ringing. Not buzzing, ringing, with the default ringtone I hadn't used in years. I reached for it on the nightstand, squinting at the screen. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Maya was still asleep beside me, and I didn't want to wake her. But something about the timing felt urgent, so I swiped to accept and pressed the phone to my ear. Hello? Silence. Not dead air, but something worse. The kind of silence that feels occupied, like someone was there listening, deciding whether to speak. Hello? I said again, louder this time. Then I heard it, my own voice. Hello? I froze. It was unmistakable. The same intonation, the same slight rasp from years of smoking in college. But it wasn't an echo. It was delayed, like the person on the other end was playing back a recording. I pulled the phone away from my ear and stared at it. The call timer was running. 017, 018, 019. What the hell? I muttered. The voice came again, louder this time. What the hell? My stomach dropped. I hung up immediately and sat there holding the phone in both hands, my pulse hammering in my ears. Maya stirred beside me. Who was that? She mumbled. Wrong number. She didn't press. She never did anymore. I tried to forget about it. Weird things happen with cell phones, especially in the middle of nowhere. Maybe it was some kind of glitch, a delay in the network, an automated spam call that got its wires crossed. But the more I thought about it, the less sense it made. The voice hadn't just sounded like me, it was me, down to the exact cadence and inflection. We spent the day near the RV. Maya read a book in one of the fold-out chairs while I fiddled with the generator, which had been making a grinding noise since we arrived. Around noon, I walked down to the creek to fill a water jug. The forest felt heavier than it had the day before, the air thick and humid, the sunlight filtering through the canopy in sickly yellow streaks. I crouched by the water's edge and dipped the jug in. That's when I saw it, a shape in the trees on the opposite bank, maybe 30 yards away. At first I thought it was a person just standing there watching me, but when I looked directly at it, it didn't move, didn't shift weight, didn't step behind a tree. It just stood. I blinked and it was gone. I told myself it was a shadow, a trick of the light, but my hands were shaking when I screwed the cap back on the jug. That night, the phone rang again. It was 3:06 a.m. I know because I checked the clock on the microwave when I stumbled out of bed. Maya was still asleep, her breathing slow and steady. The phone was on the counter, glowing in the dark. Unknown number. I stared at it for 5 rings before I answered. Hello? The silence was longer this time, 10 seconds, maybe 15. Then faintly I heard it, my own voice speaking words I hadn't said yet. I don't know what this is. I hadn't said that. But a second later, I did, my lips forming the words before I could stop them. I don't know what this is. The line went dead. I stood there in the dark, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles went white. My heart was pounding, and my mouth was dry. I looked at the call log. The number was the same as before, but when I tried to call it back, I got a recorded message. The number you have dialed is not in service. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I told Maya about the calls. She looked at me like I was crazy. Your own voice? Yeah. Like an exact match? Yes. She frowned, setting down her coffee. That's weird. I know. Could it be a prank? Maybe someone cloned your voice or something. Isn't that a thing now? I don't know, I said. But it wasn't just the voice, it was saying things I was about to say, like it knew. Maya didn't respond right away. She looked out the window at the trees, her jaw tight. Finally, she said, maybe we should leave. We've got 3 more days. So, we can leave early. And go where? Back to the apartment? Back to you working 80 hours a week while I sit around applying for jobs I'll never get? It came out harsher than I meant it to, and I regretted it immediately. Maya's face hardened. Fine, she said. Stay. But if that phone rings again, I'm not answering it. It rang again that afternoon. We were outside trying to start a fire in the ring. Maya was struggling with the lighter, and I was crumpling newspaper into balls. My phone was on the picnic table, and when it started ringing, we both froze. Unknown number. Don't answer it, Maya said. I didn't move. The phone rang again, and again. Daniel, I'm serious, don't. But I couldn't help myself. I picked it up and swiped to accept. Hello? This time, the silence was shorter. Almost immediately, I heard my voice again, not repeating what I just said, but something different. Something wrong. She's not real. I looked at Maya. She was staring at me, her face pale. What did it say? She asked. I hung up. Nothing, just static. She didn't believe me. I could see it in her eyes. That night, I couldn't sleep. Maya had gone to bed early, locking herself in the bedroom without a word. I sat in the driver's seat of the RV, staring out at the dark woods, the phone on the dashboard in front of me. It rang at 3:06 a.m. again. This time I answered without hesitation. What do you want? There was a pause. Then my voice came through clear as day. I'm in the woods. My blood went cold. I looked out the windshield, scanning the tree line. Nothing. Just shadows. Where? I asked. Behind you. I turned around slowly, my heart hammering. The RV was empty. The bedroom door was still closed. "Who is this?" I said, my voice cracking. The voice, my voice, laughed. It was a sound I'd never made before, low and humorless. "You already know." The line went dead. I didn't tell Maya about that call. The next morning she was distant, barely speaking to me. We ate breakfast in silence, and when I suggested we pack up and leave, she just shrugged. "Do whatever you want," she said. But we didn't leave. I don't know why. Maybe I was stubborn. Maybe I was scared that leaving wouldn't make a difference. The phone rang twice more that day. Once at noon, once at sunset. Both times I let it go to voicemail. But when I checked the messages later, there was nothing. Just dead air. That night I locked the RV doors and closed all the curtains. Maya went to bed without saying goodnight, and I sat in the dark, clutching the phone, waiting for it to ring. It did, at 3:06 a.m. I answered. "Hello?" This time the voice didn't speak right away. I could hear something in the background. Breathing, maybe, or the sound of wind through trees. Then, finally, my voice came through. "Come outside." "No." "Come outside, Daniel." "I'm not going anywhere." There was a pause. Then the voice said something that made my skin crawl. "She's already out here." I jumped up and ran to the bedroom. The door was open. The bed was empty. I searched the RV, calling her name, but she was gone. I threw open the door and stepped outside, my breath fogging in the cold night air. The woods were pitch black, the only light coming from the RV's interior. "Maya!" I shouted. Nothing. I grabbed a flashlight from the cabinet and started walking toward the creek, my pulse pounding in my ears. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating gnarled tree trunks and tangled undergrowth. I called her name again and again, but the forest swallowed the sound. Then I saw it, a figure standing by the water, maybe 50 yards away. I froze, the flashlight beam trembling in my hand. It was Maya, or at least, it looked like her. She was facing away from me, motionless, her arms hanging at her sides. "Maya?" She didn't turn around. I walked toward her slowly, my legs heavy, my chest tight. "Maya, what are you doing out here?" When I was 10 feet away, she finally moved. She turned her head, just her head, not her body, and looked at me. Her face was wrong. I can't explain it any better than that. It was her face, her features, her eyes, but something about it was off, like a photograph that had been slightly distorted, stretched in ways that shouldn't be possible. "Daniel," she said, and her voice was wrong too, flat, emotionless, like she was reading from a script. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice shaking. She turned the rest of her body to face me, and that's when I saw it, the phone in her hand, pressed to her ear. "Who are you talking to?" I said. She didn't answer. She just smiled, and it was the worst smile I've ever seen. Too wide, too many teeth. Then she held the phone out toward me. "It's for you," she said. I didn't take it. I backed away, my flashlight beam dancing across her face. She stepped toward me, still holding out the phone. "Take it," she said. "No." "Take it, Daniel." I turned and ran. I didn't look back. I just ran, stumbling through the trees, branches clawing at my face, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Behind me I could hear her footsteps. Slow, deliberate, unhurried. I made it back to the RV and slammed the door shut, locking it behind me. I stood there, gasping, the flashlight still clutched in my hand. I waited for her to follow, to pound on the door, to scream my name. But she didn't. The forest was silent. I stayed in the RV until dawn. When the sun finally rose, I opened the door and looked outside. Maya was sitting in one of the fold-out chairs, sipping coffee like nothing had happened. She looked up at me and smiled, a normal smile this time. "Morning," she said. I stared at her. "Where were you last night?" She frowned. "What do you mean?" "I was in bed." No, you weren't. I looked. You were gone. She shook her head. Daniel, I was asleep the whole night. You must have dreamed it. I wanted to argue, to tell her what I'd seen, but the words wouldn't come. Because part of me, a small, terrified part, wondered if she was right, if I had dreamed it. But I knew I hadn't. We left that afternoon. Maya didn't ask why, and I didn't explain. We just packed up the RV and drove back to Jacksonville in silence. The phone hasn't rung since. I've checked the call log 100 times, but the unknown number is gone. No record of it ever existing. Maya acts like everything is normal. She goes to work, comes home, makes dinner. We don't talk about the trip, we don't talk about much of anything. But sometimes late at night I'll wake up and find her sitting in the dark staring at her phone. And when I ask her what she's doing, she just smiles and says, "Nothing." I don't believe her. Because 3 nights ago I woke up at 3:06 a.m. to the sound of her voice coming from the living room. She was on the phone, speaking quietly, and I crept to the doorway to listen. She was talking to someone, and every few seconds she'd pause like she was waiting for a response. But the voice on the other end, I couldn't hear it clearly, but I knew what it sounded like. It sounded like her. Last night my phone rang again. I was alone in the apartment. Maya was working late, or so she said. I was sitting on the couch half watching TV when I heard it. The default ringtone I thought I'd disabled. Unknown number. I stared at it for a long time. Then I answered. Hello? Silence. Then faintly I heard it, my voice. But this time it wasn't repeating my words or predicting them, it was screaming. I hung up and threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall and clattered to the floor. The screen cracked but still glowing. I haven't picked it up since. I'm writing this because I need someone to know what happened. I need someone to understand that whatever came back from those woods, it wasn't Maya. Or maybe it was Maya. But something else came back with her. Something that lives in the space between words and the silence on the other end of the line. I don't know what it wants. I don't know what it's waiting for. But I know it's still calling. And one of these nights, I'm going to answer. Because I can feel it now, pulling at me the same way it pulled her. I can feel the weight of the phone in my hand even when it's across the room. I can hear the ringing even when it's silent. Maya came home an hour ago. She's in the bedroom now and I can hear her talking. She's on the phone with someone, her voice low and steady. Every few seconds, she pauses. And in those pauses, I hear it. My voice. Screaming from the woods. Story 2. My name is Rachel Miller, and I need to write this down while I still remember who I am. We arrived at Fish Lake National Forest in central Utah on a Tuesday afternoon in late September. The RV park sat nestled among stands of aspen and ponderosa pine, about 15 miles from the nearest town. My husband David had picked the location because it was quiet. We'd been arguing a lot lately, and he thought getting away from Portland would help. No cell service, no internet. Just us and the trees. The park ranger who checked us in was a woman in her 50s named Carol. She had short gray hair and wore a uniform that looked like it hadn't been washed in a while. When David mentioned we'd be staying for 2 weeks, she paused with the clipboard halfway to her chest. 2 weeks, she repeated. Is that a problem? I asked. No, no problem. She finished writing something down. Just make sure you stay on the marked trails if you go hiking, and if you see anything unusual, report it to the office. Unusual how? Carol handed David a map of the campground. Wildlife acting strange. Damaged property. That sort of thing. We were in spot 37, toward the back of the park, where the sites were more spread out. Our nearest neighbors were a retired couple in their 70s about 50 yards away. Beyond that, nothing but forest. David backed the RV into place and we spent the rest of the afternoon setting up, leveling the rig, connecting the water and electric, arranging our camping chairs outside. That first night I couldn't sleep. The silence bothered me. In the city, there's always some kind of background noise, traffic, voices, the hum of electricity. Here, the quiet was so complete it felt like pressure against my eardrums. Around 2 in the morning, I got up to use the bathroom. As I was washing my hands, I noticed something in the mirror. A small patch of skin on my left forearm, about the size of a quarter, looked wrong. Paler than the surrounding area, almost translucent. I touched it and felt nothing unusual. The texture was the same, the temperature normal. I figured it was just the fluorescent lighting in the RV bathroom making things look weird. When I got back to bed, David was snoring softly. I lay there listening to him breathe, thinking about the argument we'd had before leaving Portland. He'd accused me of being distant, cold. I'd accused him of being oblivious. The truth was probably somewhere in the middle, but neither of us wanted to admit it. The next morning, David wanted to go hiking. I wasn't enthusiastic about it, but I agreed because that's what you do when you're trying to save a marriage. We took one of the marked trails that wound through the aspen groves. The leaves were just starting to turn, patches of gold appearing among the green. About a mile in, we passed another hiker coming from the opposite direction. He was younger than us, maybe early 30s, wearing expensive hiking gear. He nodded as we passed, but something about his face struck me as odd. His expression was blank in a way that seemed deliberate, like he was actively working to keep any emotion from showing. "Friendly guy," David muttered once we were out of earshot. We hiked for another hour before turning back. When we got to the RV, I went inside to change out of my sweaty clothes. That's when I noticed the patch on my arm had grown. It was now the size of a silver dollar, and when I looked closer, I could see tiny cracks running through it like dried mud. I showed David. He squinted at it and shrugged. "Probably just dry skin. We're at higher elevation here. Use some lotion." I did use lotion. It didn't help. That night we made dinner on the propane stove. Pasta with jarred sauce, nothing fancy. As we were eating, David started telling me about an article he'd read about the aspen trees in Fish Lake. Apparently there was a massive grove nearby called Pando that was actually a single organism. Thousands of individual tree trunks all connected by one root system. The whole thing weighed something like 6 million kilograms and was tens of thousands of years old. "Imagine being that old," he said, twirling spaghetti around his fork. "Watching everything change around you while you just keep spreading, keep growing." "Sounds lonely," I said. He looked at me for a moment, then went back to his food. After dinner, we sat outside and watched the sunset. The retired couple from the nearby RV walked past and we waved. They waved back but didn't stop to chat. As the light faded, I noticed something moving between the trees about 30 yards from our site. At first I thought it was a deer, but the movement was wrong, too deliberate, too upright. I was about to mention it to David when it stepped behind a thick ponderosa and didn't reappear. "I'm going to bed," David announced, standing and stretching. "You coming?" "In a minute." I sat there alone for a while, listening to the sounds that emerged as darkness settled. Crickets, wind through the pines, something that might have been an owl. When I finally went inside, David was already asleep. I lay awake again, staring at the ceiling of the RV. My arm itched where the patch had appeared. I scratched at it without thinking, and when I pulled my hand away, I felt something flake off under my fingernails. In the dim light from the window, I could see what looked like tiny scales caught beneath them. The next morning, the patch had spread to the size of my palm. The skin there had taken on a strange quality. Still pale, but now with a faint iridescence like the inside of an abalone shell. The cracks had deepened into actual fissures. When I bent my arm, I could feel the edges catching and pulling. David noticed while we were having coffee. "Jesus, Rachel, that looks worse. Maybe we should drive into town, find a clinic." "It's just eczema or something. I've had it before." "Not like that, you haven't." "I'm fine." But I wasn't fine, and I knew it. There was something happening to my arm that had nothing to do with dry skin or elevation. Something that made me think of Carol's warning about reporting unusual things. I didn't want to leave the campground, though. The idea of getting in the car and driving filled me with an inexplicable anxiety. Like if I left, I wouldn't be able to come back. Which made no sense, but the feeling was strong enough that I insisted we stay. That afternoon, David went for a walk by himself. I stayed at the RV, sitting in one of the camping chairs and trying to read a book I'd brought. The words kept blurring together. I found myself looking at my arm instead, watching the way light played across the strange new surface. A shadow fell across my lap. I looked up to see the young hiker from the previous day standing about 10 feet away. Up close, I could see his face more clearly. The blank expression I'd noticed before was even more pronounced. His eyes tracked me without blinking. "Can I help you?" I asked. He didn't respond immediately, just kept staring. Then slowly he raised his right hand and pushed up the sleeve of his shirt. His entire forearm was covered in the same iridescent cracked skin that had appeared on mine. But his was more advanced. The fissures had opened into actual gaps, revealing something underneath that wasn't muscle or bone. Something that looked almost crystalline. "It spreads faster if you try to leave," he said. His voice was flat, emotionless. I tried to drive to the ranger station on my third day. Made it about a mile before I had to turn back. By the time I got back here, my whole arm looked like this. "What is it?" "I don't know, but it's not just the skin." He pulled his sleeve back down. "It gets into your head too. Makes you think differently. Want different things." "What kind of things?" He smiled, and it was the first expression I'd seen on his face. It wasn't reassuring. "You'll find out." Then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the trees. When David came back an hour later, I told him what happened. He wanted to pack up and leave immediately. "That guy's clearly got some kind of mental illness," he said, already starting to disconnect the water line. "We need to get you to a doctor, and we need to report him to the rangers." "Stop." "Rachel," I said, "stop." The force of my own voice surprised me. "We're not leaving." David straightened up and looked at me. Really looked at me. "What's going on with you?" "Nothing. I just think we should stay. Finish what we started." "Finish what?" "This was supposed to be a relaxing trip. And now you've got some kind of skin condition and there's a crazy person wandering around." "He's not crazy." "How do you know?" I didn't have an answer for that. Not one that made sense. But something in me knew, with absolute certainty, that the young hiker had been telling the truth, and that leaving would be a mistake. We compromised. David agreed we could stay for 2 more days, and if my arm wasn't better by then, we were going home whether I wanted to or not. I agreed because I didn't see another option, but I already knew I wouldn't be leaving with him. That night, I dreamed about the trees, about roots spreading underground, connecting everything, making it all part of one vast consciousness. In the dream, I could feel what the trees felt, the slow movement of water through xylem and phloem, the chemical signals passing between organisms, the patient hunger for light and nutrients. It was peaceful in a way I'd never experienced before, like being part of something so much larger than myself that my individual worries and fears became irrelevant. When I woke up, the patch had spread past my elbow. The skin from my fingertips to my shoulder was now covered in the same iridescent scales. The fissures had deepened, and when I flexed my hand, I could see glimpses of what lay beneath. Not flesh, but something else. Something that caught the early morning light and refracted it into colors I didn't have names for. David was still asleep. I got dressed carefully, pulling on a long-sleeved shirt to hide my arm, and went outside. The sun was just starting to come up, painting the aspen leaves gold and orange. The air smelled like pine resin and earth. Carol was walking past our site doing her morning rounds. When she saw me, she stopped. "How long have you been here?" she asked. 4 days. She nodded slowly, like this confirmed something she'd suspected. "Let me see your arms." I didn't ask how she knew, just pushed up my sleeve. She studied the scales for a long moment, then looked at my face. "It's happened to others. Not many, but a few over the years. We don't really understand it. The theory is it has something to do with Pando. The root system is so massive, so old, that it's developed its own kind of consciousness. When certain people spend too much time near it, they start to integrate. Integrate into what? The system, the forest. Pando doesn't distinguish between tree and animal and human. It just recognizes living tissue and tries to connect to it, incorporate it. Most people aren't susceptible, but some are. She gestured at my arm. The ones who are tend to be. She paused, searching for words. Unhappy, disconnected, looking for something they can't name. I thought about the arguments with David, the growing sense of isolation I'd felt even before we came here, the feeling that I was going through the motions of being a person without actually being one. What happens to them? I asked. The ones who integrate? They stop being what they were, become something else, part of the forest. She looked toward the trees. Sometimes you can see them if you know what to look for, standing among the aspens, not quite tree and not quite human, still aware in their own way, but not separate anymore, not alone. Does it hurt? I don't think so. The ones I've talked to before they complete the change say it feels like relief. David called my name from inside the RV. Carol gave me a look that might have been sympathy or might have been something else, then continued on her rounds. I went back inside. David was making coffee, and when he saw me, his face went pale. Rachel, your arm. I know. We need to leave. Right now. This isn't. Whatever this is, we need to get you to a hospital. I sat down at the small dinette table. The scales on my arm shifted and caught the light. I'm not going. What are you talking about? I mean, I'm not leaving. You can go if you want, you should go. But I'm staying. You're not making sense. I'm making perfect sense. For the first time in months, actually. I looked up at him. I don't want to go back, David. I don't want to go back to our house or our jobs or our life. I don't want to keep pretending that everything's fine when it hasn't been fine for a long time. So what? You're just going to stay here? In an RV park in the middle of nowhere? Not in the RV. He stared at me and I watched understanding dawn on his face. Horror followed quickly after. This is insane, he said. You're sick. This thing is infecting you and making you think. It's not making me think anything. It's just showing me what I already wanted. And what's that? To be part of something. To not be separate and alone and constantly wondering if I'm doing it right, being the right kind of person, saying the right things. To just be. The scales had reached my shoulder now. I could feel them starting to spread across my chest, up my neck. Soon they'd reach my face. Soon I'd stop looking human altogether. David sat down across from me. He didn't try to touch me. I love you, he said. I know. I love you too. That's not enough anymore. We sat there in silence for a while. Then he started packing his things. I stayed at the table and watched the transformation continue. The scales spread across my chest, down my other arm, up my neck to my jaw. Each new patch brought with it a sense of connection, not just to the forest, but to everything. The root system beneath the ground, the microorganisms in the soil, the birds in the trees, all of it linked, all of it aware, all of it part of the vast, patient consciousness that Carol had called Pando. David finished packing. He stood by the door with his duffel bag looking at me. Will you still be you? He asked. I don't know. Maybe. Just a different version. Will you remember me? Yes, but it won't hurt anymore. He nodded. His eyes were wet. I'm sorry I couldn't give you whatever it was you needed. You gave me what you could. It just wasn't the right shape. He left. I listened to the sound of his footsteps on the gravel, the RV door opening and closing, the engine of our car starting up. Then he was gone. I went outside. The retired couple was standing by their RV, watching me. The woman had the same blank expression I'd seen on the young hiker. When she saw me looking, she lifted her sleeve. Scales covered her arm from wrist to shoulder. I walked toward the trees. The scales had reached my face now. I could feel them spreading across my cheeks, my forehead, down my neck. My vision was starting to change, colors shifting into spectrums I hadn't been able to see before. The forest looked different, felt different, alive in ways I'd never noticed. I thought about David driving away, thought about our house in Portland, our jobs, our friends. All of it seemed distant now, like a story I'd heard about someone else's life. Important once, but not anymore. The young hiker was standing among the aspens about 30 yards in. His transformation was nearly complete. Scales covered every visible inch of skin, and his limbs had elongated, fingers stretching into something between branch and bone. He nodded at me, and I understood it as an acknowledgement, a welcome. I kept walking. The scales continued to spread, my body continuing to change. Soon I'd be like him. Soon after that, I'd be like the others I could now sense scattered throughout the forest. Human-shaped things standing silent among the trees, their consciousness merged with the vast network of roots beneath our feet. It didn't frighten me. The change felt natural, inevitable, like coming home after being lost for a very long time. I stopped at the edge of a grove of aspens and stood there feeling my feet beginning to root into the soil. The sensation was pleasant, grounding. Around me, the forest hummed with life and connection and purpose. No more wondering if I was enough. No more anxiety about doing things right. Just existence, pure and simple, as part of something so much larger and older than anything I'd been before. The last coherent thought I had before my individual consciousness began to dissolve into the collective was that I hoped David would be okay, that he'd find someone who could give him what he needed, whatever that was, that he'd be happy. Then even that thought dispersed, spreading out through the root system like water through soil, becoming just another piece of data in the vast patient network that stretched beneath the earth. David drove back to Portland alone. He tried to report Rachel's disappearance to the police, but they found no evidence of foul play. Just an abandoned RV at a campground in Utah, and a woman who'd walked into the forest and never come back. They searched for 3 days, then called it off. People got lost in the wilderness all the time, they told him. Sometimes they were never found. He sold the RV, sold the house, started over somewhere else trying to forget, but sometimes late at night when he couldn't sleep, he'd think about that last morning, the look on Rachel's face as the scales spread across her skin, the peace in her voice when she told him she wasn't leaving, and sometimes he wondered if she'd really been sick at all, or if she'd finally found what she was looking for. Carol still works at the campground. She still checks in visitors and warns them to report anything unusual. She's learned to recognize the ones who are susceptible, the ones who come to the forest carrying the weight of disconnection, looking for something they can't name. Most of them leave after a few days, none the worse for wear. But some of them stay. If you walk deep enough into the aspen groves near Site 37, you might see them, standing among the trees, covered in iridescent scales that catch the light. Not quite human anymore, but not quite trees either. Something in between, something older and stranger and more connected than anything we have words for. They don't move when you approach. They don't speak. But if you're quiet and patient, you can feel it. The vast consciousness they've become part of, spreading beneath your feet, connecting everything, making it all one. And if you're susceptible, if you're carrying your own weight of loneliness and disconnection, you might feel the pull of it, the promise of relief, of belonging, of finally being part of something larger than yourself. Most people resist. Most people turn around and walk back to their cars and their lives and their carefully maintained separation from the world around them. But some people don't. Some people keep walking. And eventually, if you go back to that same spot months or years later, you might see a new figure standing among the aspens, scales glinting in the filtered sunlight, eyes open but unseeing in any human way, rooted in the soil, connected to everything, finally home. Rachel Miller is still out there, somewhere in the forest, not gone, but transformed, not dead, but not alive in any way we'd recognize. Part of something so vast and patient and inhuman that the word alive doesn't really apply anymore. Sometimes people claim to see her, standing among the trees near Site 37. They say she looks peaceful. They say her skin catches the light like mother of pearl, and her eyes are full of colors that don't have names. They say if you stand near her long enough, you can feel it too. The pull of connection, the promise of belonging, the The slow, patient hunger of the forest reaching up through the soil toward your feet. Most people don't stay long enough to find out what happens next, but some do. And they never leave. Story 3. My name is Alex Johnson, and I need to write this down while I can still remember it clearly, while I still know what's real. It happened 3 weeks ago at Fish Lake National Forest in Utah. I'd driven out there alone in my beat-up Subaru, planning to spend 5 days hiking and camping. I'm a graphic designer, work from home mostly, and I'd been feeling restless. My apartment in Salt Lake City had started to feel like a cage. I needed trees, silence, something that wasn't a screen. The campground was half empty when I arrived on a Wednesday afternoon in early November. Off-season. Most of the RVs and campers had cleared out after Labor Day. There were maybe 6 other vehicles scattered across the sites. A couple of fifth wheels, a small Airstream, and what looked like someone's permanent setup near the back. A old Class C with Arizona plates and lawn chairs set up outside. I picked a spot near the edge, close to where the trail started. The ranger who checked me in was a woman in her 50s with sun-damaged skin and tired eyes. She barely looked at me when she took my fee. "Weather's supposed to hold," she said. "Gets cold at night, though. You prepared?" I told her I was. She nodded and went back to whatever she'd been reading on her phone. The first day was exactly what I needed. I set up my tent, organized my gear, then spent the afternoon hiking one of the shorter trails. The aspens were mostly bare, their white trunks standing out against the darker pines. Everything smelled like earth and pine needles. My phone had no signal, which was fine. That's what I'd wanted. I passed a few other hikers, a couple in their 60s with expensive gear, a younger guy with a dog, but mostly I was alone. The silence was heavy, but good. Comfortable. I ate dinner at the picnic table by my tent as the sun went down, then crawled into my sleeping bag around 9. I woke up around 3 in the morning needing to piss. It was cold enough that I could see my breath inside the tent. I fumbled for my headlamp, unzipped the tent, and walked a short distance into the trees. The campground was completely dark, except for one light still on in the Class C at the back. When I got back to my tent, I kicked off my boots and climbed into my sleeping bag. My feet were freezing. I wiggled my toes, trying to warm them up, and felt something hard inside my left boot. I figured it was a pebble or maybe a pine cone fragment. I was too tired to deal with it right then. I'd just shake it out in the morning. But it bothered me, that little hard object pressing against the bottom of the boot. After a few minutes, I sat up, turned on my headlamp, and reached for the boot. I shook it upside down over my hand. A tooth fell out. Not a small tooth. A human molar, adult-sized, with the root still attached. I stared at it in my palm, my brain trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It was dirty. The root end still had bits of what looked like dried blood and tissue. The crown was yellowish-white, with a small dark cavity on one side. I dropped it immediately. It hit the floor of my tent with a soft sound. My first thought was that it had been there when I bought the boots. Some weird manufacturing defect or prank. But these were hiking boots I'd owned for 2 years. I'd worn them dozens of times. I picked the tooth up with 2 fingers and held it under my headlamp. It was definitely real, definitely human. The root was ragged, like it had been pulled out violently or had fallen out from decay. I sat there for maybe 10 minutes just holding this tooth, trying to think of any logical explanation. Maybe I'd stepped on it somehow during my hike and it had gotten wedged inside my boot. But that didn't make sense. The boot had been laced tight, and who loses a tooth on a hiking trail? Eventually, I put it in a Ziploc bag with my first aid supplies and tried to go back to sleep. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept thinking about that tooth in my boot, how it got there, where it came from. When dawn finally came, I was exhausted. I made coffee on my camp stove and sat at the picnic table, staring at the Ziploc bag. The tooth looked even worse in daylight, the root dark and organic, unmistakably part of someone's body. I decided to show it to the ranger. Maybe someone had lost it, reported it somehow. Maybe there was a reasonable explanation. The ranger station was a small building near the campground entrance. The same woman from yesterday was there, sitting behind a desk with a space heater running at her feet. "Morning," she said without looking up. "Hey, I found something weird." I pulled out the Ziploc bag and set it on her desk. She glanced at it, then did a double take. Her expression didn't change much, but something shifted in her eyes. "Where'd you find this?" "In my boot. This morning. I mean, I found it at 3 a.m., but in your boot." She picked up the bag, examined the tooth through the plastic. "Which site are you at?" I told her. She set the bag down and looked at me directly for the first time. "Anyone else with you?" "No, just me." "You sure this isn't yours?" "I'm sure." She nodded slowly. "There's a lost and found box, but I don't think anyone's going to claim this. You want me to keep it?" "Do you know how it could have gotten in my boot?" "No idea." She pushed the bag back toward me. "Could have been there when you bought them. Could have picked it up somehow on the trail. Weird things turn up in the woods." "Should I report it to someone? Like, is this evidence of something?" She shrugged. "Evidence of what? Someone lost a tooth?" "Happens. People lose teeth. Could be decades old for all we know." I left the ranger station feeling unsettled. She hadn't seemed concerned, but she also hadn't seemed surprised. Like finding a tooth was strange, but not impossible. I spent most of that day hiking a different trail, trying to shake off the feeling. The tooth was still in my pack in its Ziploc bag. I'd meant to leave it at the ranger station, but at the last second had taken it back. I'm not sure why. The trail was empty except for one moment when I passed an older man coming down as I was heading up. He had a weathered face and moved with the careful steps of someone with bad knees. "Afternoon," he said. "Afternoon." He paused. "You camping at Fish Lake?" "Yeah." He nodded. Seemed like he wanted to say something else, then just gave a slight wave and continued down the trail. That night I made dinner early and ate in my tent. The temperature had dropped and clouds were moving in. I could hear other campers, voices carrying across the campground the sound of someone chopping wood. Normal sounds. I fell asleep around 8, exhausted from the previous sleepless night. I woke up to someone unzipping my tent. The sound was unmistakable, that specific metal-on-metal sliding sound. My eyes snapped open. My headlamp was off. The tent was completely dark. The unzipping stopped halfway. I held my breath. Listened. Nothing. My heart was slamming in my chest. I reached slowly for my headlamp, found it, turned it on. The tent zipper was halfway open, from the inside. I stared at it. I had definitely zipped it completely before going to sleep. I always did. And it was unzipped from the inside. The zipper pull was on my side of the door. I grabbed my phone even though I knew there was no signal. 11:47 p.m. I'd been asleep for maybe 3 hours. I sat there for a long time, listening. The wind had picked up and the tent fabric was rustling, but I couldn't hear anything that sounded like footsteps or breathing, or another person. Eventually I zipped the tent closed again, this time using a small carabiner to clip the two zipper pulls together. Then I wedged my backpack against the door. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. In the morning I examined the tent carefully. No tears, no other damage. The carabiner was still in place. Nothing had been disturbed. I broke down my tent and moved my campsite to a spot closer to the ranger station, near where an older couple had their RV parked. I told myself I'd just feel safer with neighbors. The couple, Bill and Sharon, both retired, friendly in that surface-level way older people can be, waved as I was setting up. "You were over on the far end, weren't you?" Bill called over. "Yeah, wanted to be closer to the facilities." It was a lie, but seemed reasonable. "We don't blame you. Gets creepy out here at night when the wind picks up." I asked them how long they'd been camping. "Oh, we've been here about a week," Sharon said. "We come every year. Love it this time of year when it's quiet." "Have you noticed anything strange?" They looked at each other. Bill smiled. "Strange how?" "I don't know, just weird stuff. Sharon laughed. Honey, we're in the woods. Everything's a little weird. You hear all kinds of animals at night. Probably just not used to it. I nodded and let it drop. That afternoon, I decided to do a short hike, just an hour out and back. I'd barely slept in 2 days and wasn't up for anything strenuous. The trail I chose was one I'd done on my first day. Easy terrain, well marked. About 20 minutes in, I saw the older man again. The same one from yesterday with the bad knees. He was sitting on a log just off the trail, drinking from a water bottle. "Taking a break?" I said. He looked up at me and I realized he'd been crying. His eyes were red, his face wet. "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah." He wiped his face with his sleeve. "Sorry. Just having a moment." I didn't know what to say. I started to move past him when he spoke again. "You find anything strange out here?" I stopped. "What do you mean?" "In your gear, your boots, your tent, anything that shouldn't be there." The hair on the back of my neck stood up. "Why would you ask that?" He looked at me for a long moment. "Because it means you're next." "Next for what?" "To lose something." He stood up slowly, adjusted his pack. "I'd leave if I were you. Tonight. Don't wait." "I don't understand." "You will." He started walking down the trail, away from me. "Check your boots again." I watched him disappear around a bend in the trail. My hands were shaking. I turned around and practically ran back to my campsite. Bill and Sharon's RV was empty. They'd mentioned something about driving into town for supplies. I went straight to my tent and grabbed my hiking boots. I shook them out over the picnic table. Nothing. I checked the insoles, ran my fingers along every seam and crevice. Nothing. I sat down on the bench, feeling stupid. The old man was clearly dealing with something. Grief, maybe mental illness. His warning didn't mean anything, but that night I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I kept the carabiner on my tent zipper, kept my headlamp and knife within reach. Every sound made me flinch. Branches breaking, the wind, other campers moving around in the dark. Around midnight I heard it. Footsteps. Not animal footsteps. Human footsteps, crunching through the leaves and pine needles. Slow, deliberate, circling my tent. I turned on my headlamp, unzipped the tent door partway. Nothing. Just darkness and trees and the other campsites with their dim lights. The footsteps had stopped. I zipped the tent back up and sat there, knife in hand, waiting. At 3 a.m. my watch alarm went off. I'd set it as a reminder to take some ibuprofen. My shoulder had been bothering me from carrying my pack. I turned off the alarm and reached for my water bottle. That's when I noticed my right boot. It was inside the tent, right next to my sleeping bag. I hadn't brought my boots inside, I never did. They were muddy and I always left them outside under the rainfly. I stared at the boot, my mind racing. Had I brought them in without thinking? Was I that tired? I picked it up slowly. It was heavy, heavier than it should be. I turned it upside down. 3 teeth fell out. Not molars this time. Front teeth. Incisors. One of them still had a piece of gum tissue attached. I made a sound, not quite a scream, more like a choked gasp. I scrambled backward in my sleeping bag away from the teeth. They lay there on the tent floor, small and white and impossibly wrong. I grabbed my phone, my headlamp, my knife. I didn't bother with my boots or my pack. I unzipped the tent and ran. I ran to Bill and Sharon's RV and pounded on the door. "Help! Please, I need help!" No answer. I pounded again, harder. "Bill, Sharon!" The RV was dark, silent. I tried the door handle, unlocked. I opened it. "Hello? I'm sorry to barge in, but..." The smell hit me immediately. Copper, and something worse. Something organic and wrong. I shined my headlamp inside. Bill was sitting at the small dinette table. His mouth was open, his lips pulled back in something like a smile. His mouth was completely empty. No teeth at all, just bloody gums. Sharon was in the back, on the bed. Same thing. Mouth open, empty, blood dried dark on her chin and neck. I backed out of the RV, tripped over the steps, fell hard on my back. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I got up and ran to the ranger station. The lights were on. I burst through the door. The ranger was there, sitting at her desk exactly like before. She looked up at me calmly. Something wrong? Bill and Sharon, they're dead. Someone killed them. Who? The couple. In the RV. Their teeth. Someone took their teeth. She stood up slowly. Show me. We walked back to the RV. My legs felt weak. I couldn't stop shaking. The ranger climbed the steps and looked inside. She was in there for maybe 30 seconds, then came back out. There's no one in there. What? RV's empty. No people, no blood, nothing. But I saw... You saw wrong. She looked at me carefully. How much sleep have you gotten the last few nights? I know what I saw. Listen to me. Her voice was firm now, not unkind. You're exhausted. You're alone out here. Your mind is playing tricks, I've seen it before. Happens to solo campers sometimes. The isolation gets to them. This isn't... I found teeth. In my boot. Multiple teeth. Show me. We walked back to my tent. I shined my headlamp inside. The 3 teeth were gone. The tent floor was empty except for my sleeping bag and gear. I swear to God they were here. The ranger put a hand on my shoulder. I think you should pack up and head home. Get some real sleep. This place isn't good for you right now. I packed my stuff in less than 10 minutes, threw everything in my car without organizing it. I didn't care about the tent stakes I left behind or the cooler I forgot by the picnic table. I just needed to leave. The ranger watched me from her station as I drove out. I could see her in my rearview mirror standing in the doorway, not moving. The drive back to Salt Lake City took 4 hours. I stopped once at a gas station, went to the bathroom, bought a coffee I didn't drink. The clerk asked if I was okay, and I told her I was fine. When I got home, I carried my gear up to my apartment and dumped it all in the corner. I was too tired to deal with it. I took a shower standing under the hot water until the tank ran out, then collapsed into bed. I slept for 14 hours. When I woke up, the sun was coming through my bedroom window. Everything looked normal, safe. My apartment, my things, my life. I made coffee, ate some cereal, checked my email, scrolled through social media. The world had kept turning while I was gone. Around noon, I decided to start unpacking my camping gear. I'd need to clean everything, make sure nothing was damaged or dirty. I emptied my backpack first. Sleeping bag, camp stove, first aid kit, everything was there. Then I started on my boots. I picked up the right boot and turned it upside down, just to make sure there was no dirt or debris inside. Something small and white fell out and landed on my carpet. A tooth. A tiny tooth. A child's baby tooth. I stared at it. My coffee mug slipped from my other hand and shattered on the floor. The tooth had a small piece of pink paper tied to it with thread. I picked it up with shaking hands. The paper had writing on it in pencil, child's handwriting. For the tooth fairy. Love, Emma. That was 3 weeks ago. I threw the tooth away immediately. Took it outside to the dumpster, buried it deep in a trash bag. I told myself it was just a coincidence. Something stuck in my boot from before the trip, or maybe I'd stepped on it somewhere in the city. But I know that's not true, because every few days I find another one. In my shoes, in my jacket pocket, inside my car's cup holder, in my pillowcase. Small teeth, adult teeth. Some are clean. Some have roots. Some have bits of tissue still attached. I've stopped showing them to people. I tried at first, showed one to my friend Marcus, another to my dentist. They looked at me with concern and suggested I was stressed, that I should talk to someone. Maybe they're right. Maybe this is all in my head, some kind of breakdown. But I don't think so. I think something in Fish Lake National Forest decided I was next. Next for what, I'm not sure. But I remember what the old man said. To lose something. Last night, I woke up at 3 a.m. and my mouth felt strange. I went to the bathroom, looked in the mirror, opened my mouth wide. All of my teeth were still there. But when I ran my tongue along my lower gums, One of my molars felt loose. Not painful, just mobile. Like it might fall out if I pushed it hard enough. I've been holding my mouth very still since then, trying not to move my jaw too much, not to bite down on anything hard. I know it's only a matter of time. I tried to go back to Fish Lake last week. I wanted to find the ranger, find that old man, find anyone who could explain what's happening to me. But when I got to the turnoff, my car wouldn't take it. The steering wheel felt locked. No matter how hard I tried to turn, the car kept going straight on the highway. I drove for another hour, then turned around and came home. I'm writing this because I need to document what's happening while I still can, while I can still remember what's real. The loose tooth is wobbling more now. I can feel it with my tongue, hanging on by what feels like a thread of flesh. I wonder where it will end up. In someone's boot at Fish Lake, probably. In their tent, or their pocket, or their car. I wonder if they'll report it, if they'll show it to the ranger, if she'll look at them with those tired eyes and tell them that weird things turn up in the woods. I wonder if they'll come looking for answers like I did. I wonder if they'll find me. My mouth tastes like copper now. The tooth is barely attached. I can feel it shifting every time I breathe. I should pull it out. Just get it over with. But I'm afraid that if I do, if I take that first one out myself, the rest will follow. All of them, falling out like dominoes, leaving my mouth empty and bloody and wrong. So I'm sitting here at my kitchen table, typing this with one hand while the other covers my mouth, trying to hold everything in place just a little bit longer. Outside my window, it's starting to get dark, and I can hear footsteps in the hallway, slow and deliberate, stopping at my door. I think they've come to collect. My name is Marcus Webb. I'm writing this from a hospital bed in Moab, Utah, though the doctors say there's nothing physically wrong with me. They keep asking if I want to talk to someone, a therapist, a counselor, anyone who can help me process the trauma. But how do you process something when you're not even sure what happened? It started 3 weeks ago when my girlfriend Claire and I decided to take a long weekend camping trip to the San Rafael Swell. Claire had been planning it for months, obsessing over gear reviews and trail maps, printing out articles about the best dispersed camping spots. She'd been working insane hours at her architecture firm, pulling consecutive all-nighters on a hotel project in Denver. And I think she saw this trip as some kind of reset button, a chance to disconnect and remember why we'd moved to Colorado in the first place. I wasn't as enthusiastic. I'd grown up camping with my family every summer, but those trips had ended badly. My younger sister Maya had wandered off during a hike in the flat tops when she was 7. We found her 6 hours later, unhurt, but refusing to speak about where she'd been. She'd been different after that, withdrawn, prone to staring at nothing for long periods. My parents never took us camping again, but Claire had been so excited, and I loved seeing her that way. The Claire who emerged after 70-hour work weeks was hollow-eyed and snappish, someone I barely recognized. So I agreed, even though the idea of sleeping in a tent made my chest tight. Actually, Claire said one night, scrolling through her laptop, what if we rented an RV? There's this place outside Moab that has good rates. We could still do the dispersed camping thing, but with, a bathroom and a bed. I felt relief wash over me. That sounds perfect. We picked up the RV on a Thursday afternoon. It was a 1987 Winnebago Chieftain, white with brown and orange stripes that looked exactly like what you'd expect from the 80s. The rental guy, whose name tag said Denny, was maybe 60, with sun-damaged skin and yellow fingernails. "She's a beaut," he said, patting the RV's side like it was a horse. "Rebuilt the engine myself last year. You folks heading to the swell?" "That's the plan," Claire said. Denny's expression shifted slightly. "Whereabouts?" "We were thinking somewhere off Temple Mountain Road," Claire said, "away from the crowds." Denny looked at the RV, then back at us. "You might want to stick closer to the main areas. Cell service gets real spotty once you head toward the swell's interior." "That's kind of the point," I said, trying to sound friendly. Right. He handed Claire the keys. "Just, if you see any old trail markers, the wooden ones with paint, don't follow them." Most of those date back to uranium mining days. Half of them lead to shafts that aren't marked on any modern maps. We'll be careful, Claire assured him. Denny nodded, but didn't look reassured. As we pulled out of the lot, I saw him in the side mirror, still watching us. The drive from Moab to the San Rafael swell takes about an hour. The landscape shifts from red rock formations to high desert, with the swell rising in the distance like a massive stone wave, frozen in time. Claire drove while I navigated, though the directions were simple enough. Follow Highway 24 west, then turn onto Temple Mountain Road. The road turned to graded dirt after about 10 miles. We passed a few other vehicles heading back toward the highway, most of them pulling camping trailers or hauling ATVs. Claire had researched several potential camping spots, all of them accessible by high-clearance vehicles but remote enough to feel isolated. "There," she said, pointing to a side road that was really just 2 tire tracks through sagebrush. "According to the GPS, there's a flat area about half a mile down this way, right near a wash." The RV handled the terrain better than I expected, though I gripped the door handle every time we dipped into a rut. The landscape here was otherworldly. Layered rock formations in shades of red, orange, and cream, punctuated by dark green juniper trees. In the late afternoon light, everything seemed to glow. We found the spot exactly where Claire's GPS said it would be. A level area of packed dirt and sand, maybe 50 yards from a dry wash. The nearest visible road was the one we'd driven in on, and I couldn't see any other signs of human presence. No tire tracks, no fire rings, nothing. "Perfect," Claire said, killing the engine. It was perfect. Too perfect, maybe. The silence after the engine died was total. No birds, no insects, no wind. Just the tick of cooling metal in our breathing. Claire must have noticed my expression. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said, just taking it in. We spent the next hour setting up. Not that there was much to do. The RV was self-contained, and we didn't plan on building a fire until later. Claire pulled out her camp chair and a book, some literary novel about grief that had been on her nightstand for months. I grabbed 2 beers from the cooler and joined her outside. The sun was setting, painting the rock formations in shades of pink and gold. It should have been beautiful. It was beautiful. But something felt off in a way I couldn't articulate, like the landscape was waiting for something. "Hey," Claire said, nudging my foot with hers. "No work thoughts allowed." That was the deal. "I'm not thinking about work." "Then why do you have your thinking about work face?" I smiled. "This is just my face." She threw a pebble at me. "Liar. But seriously, you seem tense. We can go back if you're not feeling it." "No," I said quickly. "No, I'm good. This is good." And it was good. We watched the sunset, drank our beers, made dinner on the RV's tiny stove. Claire talked about maybe taking a sabbatical, doing some traveling. Not Instagram traveling, she clarified. Real traveling. Like rent an apartment in Lisbon for 3 months and just exist. Would you ever want to do something like that? With you? Yeah, of course. She smiled. The first genuine smile I'd seen in weeks. "I love you, you know that?" "I love you too." As darkness fell, the temperature dropped fast. We retreated into the RV and played cards by the overhead light, drinking wine and laughing at nothing. Around 10, Claire started yawning. "I'm going to crash," she said. "You coming?" "In a bit. I want to finish this." I gestured to my wine. "Don't stay up too late. I want to get an early start tomorrow. There's this slot canyon I want to hike before it gets hot." She kissed me and disappeared into the back bedroom. I sat at the dinette table, nursing my wine and scrolling through my phone. No service, as expected. The offline maps still worked, showing our location as a blue dot in an expanse of tan and green. I don't know what made me look out the window. Maybe a sound, though I don't remember hearing anything. But I looked, and that's when I saw it. A sign. Wooden, weathered, maybe 4 feet tall. It was planted in the ground about 20 yards from the RV, visible in the moonlight. I hadn't seen it when we'd arrived, and I was certain, absolutely certain, it hadn't been there when we'd watched the sunset. I stared at it through the window, my wine forgotten. The sign had something written on it, but I couldn't make out the words from this distance. It looked old, the kind of hand-painted trail marker Denny had warned us about. My first thought was that we'd simply missed it in the fading light. But that didn't make sense. We'd walked all around the campsite, and Claire had specifically checked for hazards like old mine shafts or unstable ground. There was no way we could have missed a 4-foot sign. I should have stayed inside. Every instinct told me to lock the door and forget about it until morning. But curiosity overrode common sense. I grabbed my headlamp and quietly opened the RV door, careful not to wake Claire. The night air was cold and perfectly still. My breath formed clouds that dissipated slowly. I clicked on the headlamp and walked toward the sign, my footsteps crunching on the sandy soil. As I got closer, I could make out the text. It was painted in faded red letters, uneven and hand-done. Home. That was it. Just the word home, and an arrow pointing east, deeper into the swell. I stood there, illuminated by my headlamp, trying to make sense of it. Home. Whose home? There was nothing out here. No houses, no ranches, nothing but miles of empty desert and rock. The arrow pointed along what might have been an old road, though it was barely visible now, just a slight depression in the vegetation. I followed the line of it with my eyes, but my headlamp beam only penetrated about 30 feet before being swallowed by darkness. I reached out and touched the sign. The wood was rough, splintered in places but solid, not rotted. I checked the base where it entered the ground. The dirt around it was packed hard, as if the sign had been here for years. But it hadn't been here 2 hours ago. I was sure of it. A sound made me turn. A scraping like something being dragged across rock. I spun around, my headlamp beam sweeping across the campsite. Nothing. The RV sat silent and dark except for the small light Claire had left on in the bedroom. "Hello?" I called out, immediately feeling stupid. Who was I expecting to answer? Silence. Then, just as I was about to head back to the RV, I heard it again. Scraping, rhythmic, coming from somewhere beyond my light. Not close, but not far enough away either. I walked quickly back to the RV, locked the door and stood at the window, looking out at the sign. It stood there innocently, just a piece of weathered wood with faded paint. But my hands were shaking. I didn't sleep well that night. I kept thinking I heard sounds outside. Footsteps, scraping, voices just below the threshold of comprehension. Twice I got up to check the locks. The second time, around 3 in the morning, I looked out the window at the sign. There was someone standing next to it. No. Not someone. Something. A shape, darker than the surrounding darkness, vaguely person-sized. My hand fumbled for the light switch, and in the second it took to flip it on, the shape was gone. I stood at the window for 20 minutes, scanning the darkness with my headlamp through the glass, but saw nothing. Eventually, I convinced myself it had been a trick of shadows and exhaustion. When I finally slept, I dreamed of Maya. She was 7 again, standing in a forest clearing, her back to me. When I called her name, she turned around, but her face was wrong, too long, the features sliding like wax. She opened her mouth, and the word that came out was home, but in a voice that wasn't hers. Claire shook me awake at 7. "Hey, you okay? You were talking in your sleep." I sat up, disoriented. Morning light filtered through the RV windows, warm and normal. What was I saying? "I don't know, something about your sister. You said her name a few times." I rubbed my face. "Just a dream. You want to talk about it?" "Not really." Claire studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, I'm going to make coffee. Then we should head out if we want to beat the heat." I got dressed and joined her in the tiny kitchen. Through the window, I could see the sign, stark and obvious in the daylight. Claire followed my gaze. "Huh," she said. "I don't remember that being there yesterday." "You saw it too?" "Yeah, it's right there." She paused. "Wait, was it not there before?" "I don't think so. I looked around the site pretty thoroughly when we arrived." Claire frowned. "That's weird. Maybe we just missed it in the twilight?" "Maybe. But she didn't sound convinced, and neither was I. We drank our coffee in silence, both of us glancing at the sign through the window. "What do you think it means?" Claire asked. "Home. That's an odd thing for a trail marker." Denny mentioned old uranium mining camps. "Maybe it's pointing toward one of those. You want to check it out?" Every fiber of my being screamed no. "Do you?" Claire bit her lip. "I mean, it's probably just some rancher's old property marker or something. But yeah, I'm curious. We could walk a little way down that trail, see if there's anything interesting." "What about the slot canyon?" "We can do both. Come on, it's probably nothing. Just a weird old sign." I wanted to argue, to tell her about the shape I'd seen in the night, the sounds, the feeling of wrongness that had been growing since we arrived. But in the daylight, those concerns seemed irrational, like something a child would worry about. "Okay," I said, "but just a short walk, and we take the satellite phone." Claire agreed. We loaded a day pack with water, snacks, and the emergency satellite phone Claire's firm had insisted she bring. The plan was simple. Follow the direction the sign pointed for 30 minutes, then turn around regardless of what we found. We set out at 8:30. The temperature was already climbing, the sun intense despite the early hour. The trail the sign pointed toward was barely visible, just a slight indentation where vehicles had once driven, now overgrown with rabbit brush and bunch grass. "This definitely hasn't been used in a while," Claire observed, using her hiking pole to push aside a sage branch. The landscape here was different from the area around our campsite, more broken, with rocky outcrops and small canyons cutting through the terrain. Beautiful, but in a harsh way that made me feel small and exposed. We walked in silence, the only sounds our footsteps and breathing. After about 15 minutes, we came to another sign. This one was newer, or at least less weathered than the first. Same style, same red paint, but the letters were clearer. Almost home. The arrow pointed ahead, along what was now definitely a trail, not a road anymore, but a footpath, narrow and winding between rock formations. "Okay, this is genuinely weird," Claire said. "Who puts up signs like this?" "Maybe it's an art installation," I suggested, though I didn't believe it. "Like some desert artist's commentary on homecoming or whatever. Out here, where no one would see it." She had a point. We'd been hiking for 15 minutes and hadn't seen any sign of recent human presence. No footprints, no trash, no cairns or trail markers, except these strange signs. "I don't like this," I said. "Let's head back." Claire checked her watch. "We've only been walking 20 minutes, just 15 more. I want to see if there's anything at the end." I should have insisted we turn around. That's what I tell myself now, lying in this hospital bed. If I'd just put my foot down, insisted we leave, maybe things would have ended differently. But I didn't. I said okay, and we kept walking. The trail took us into a small canyon, its walls rising maybe 60 feet on either side. The rock was striated with different colors, red, cream, purple, and the morning sun hadn't reached the bottom yet, leaving us in cool shadow. Our footsteps echoed slightly, and I found myself walking more quietly, though I couldn't have said why. 5 minutes into the canyon, we found the third sign. "Welcome home," no arrow this time. Just those two words painted on a sign that stood in the middle of the trail. And beyond it, set into the canyon wall, was a door. Not a cave entrance or a natural opening. An actual door, wooden, weathered with metal hinges and a rusted handle. It looked like it belonged on a farmhouse, not embedded in a cliff face in the middle of nowhere. "What the fuck?" Claire breathed. We approached slowly. The door was maybe 6 feet tall and 3 feet wide, set into the rock as if the canyon wall had been carved out specifically to accommodate it. Around the frame I could see chisel marks in the stone. "This is a mine entrance," I said, relief washing over me. "It has to be. That's why the signs. It's probably someone's old claim and they called it home or whatever. But why put in a door? And who maintains the signs?" Good questions. The door looked old, but not as old as it should have been if this was a Depression-era uranium mine. And the signs, especially the second two, were far too well preserved to have been here for decades. Claire reached for the handle. "Don't," I said sharply. She pulled her hand back, startled by my tone. "I was just going to see if it's locked." Denny told us not to mess with old mine shafts. He said not to follow unmarked trails to mines. This is marked, and it has a door, which means someone uses it or at least maintains it. Maybe there's a caretaker or something. Then where are they? And why would they put up signs saying, "Welcome home"? Claire didn't have an answer for that. We stood there staring at the door, neither of us willing to touch it or turn away. That's when we heard the sound. A voice, muffled but distinct, coming from behind the door, singing. Someone was singing behind that door, their voice echoing as if in a large space. The song was familiar, an old tune my mother used to hum. "You are my sunshine." Claire and I looked at each other. The singing continued, female, soft, interrupted occasionally by what might have been laughter. "Hello?" Claire called out. The singing stopped abruptly. For a long moment there was silence. Then, "Who's there?" The voice was young, cheerful, not at all what I expected. Claire glanced at me, then called back. "We're just hikers. Are you okay in there?" Another pause. "I'm home. Are you home?" We're camping nearby," Claire said carefully. "Do you need help?" "Help?" The voice sounded confused. "No, I'm home. But you're not home. You should come home. It's nice here." Something about the way she said it, the cadence, the odd emphasis, made my skin crawl. "We should go," I said quietly to Claire. "In a second." "To the door." "Who are you? How did you get in there?" "I walked home. The signs showed me the way. They'll show you too. Just follow the signs home." "This isn't our home," Claire said. "Not yet, but it will be. It was made for us. All of us. Everyone who comes here." I grabbed Claire's arm. "We're leaving. Now." This time she didn't argue. We backed away from the door, neither of us wanting to turn our backs on it. The voice behind it started singing again, that same children's song as we retreated down the canyon. We didn't speak until we were out of the canyon and back in the open desert. Claire was breathing hard, though we hadn't been running. "That was someone in trouble," she said. "We should call for help." Did she sound like she was in trouble? She sounded insane. "We need to call the sheriff, report it." I pulled out the satellite phone and tried to power it on. Nothing. The screen remained black. "Battery's dead," I said, though I knew we'd charged it fully the night before. Claire took it from me and tried. Same result. "That's impossible. It was at 100%. Let's just get back to the RV. We can drive back to town and report it there." The walk back seemed longer than the walk out. The sun had climbed higher, and the temperature was approaching 90. I kept glancing behind us, expecting to see someone following, but there was never anyone there. When we got back to the campsite, there was another sign. This one was planted right next to the RV, so close that the door would hit it if opened fully. A new sign, the paint still tacky, the wood fresh. "Don't leave," Claire made a sound between a laugh and a sob. "Okay, fuck this. We're leaving. Right now." I ran to the RV door and tried the handle. Locked. I fumbled for my keys, hands shaking so badly it took 3 tries to get the key in. When we got inside, everything was exactly as we'd left it. Nothing disturbed, nothing out of place. But the RV smelled different, like earth and copper. "Start the engine," Claire said. "Just start it and let's go." I turned the key. The engine cranked but didn't catch. I tried again. Same result. "Marcus?" "I don't know. It worked fine yesterday." I tried for 5 minutes, pumping the gas, checking the obvious things I knew to check. Nothing worked. The engine would crank but wouldn't turn over. "We'll walk out," Claire said. "We'll follow the road back to the highway and flag someone down. That's like 12 miles. So? We have water. We can do 12 miles. We can't stay here." She was right. Whatever was happening, we needed to get away from this place. We loaded our packs with water, food, and as much gear as we could comfortably carry. Claire tried the satellite phone again. Still dead. Her regular phone had no service, as expected. We set out at noon, following our tire tracks back toward the main road. The temperature was over 90 now, the sun relentless. But we moved fast, motivated by fear more than discomfort. We'd been walking maybe 20 minutes when we saw the sign. It was planted in the middle of our tire tracks, impossible to miss. But it hadn't been there when we'd driven in 2 days ago, and it hadn't been there when we'd left the RV 20 minutes earlier. Home. The arrow pointed back toward our campsite. How? Claire whispered. I didn't answer because I didn't have one. We walked past the sign, giving it a wide berth, and continued along our tracks. 15 minutes later, we saw another sign. You should go home. They're fucking with us, Claire said, anger replacing fear in her voice. Someone is following us and planting these signs to mess with us. Who? I don't know. That woman from the canyon, some tweaker, does it matter? We keep going. But 10 minutes after that, we stopped. Because ahead of us, clearly visible in the distance, was our campsite. The brown and orange striped RV, the wash, the rock formations, all exactly where we'd left them. We'd been walking for almost an hour, following our own tracks, never deviating from the path. But somehow, we'd ended up back where we started. This isn't possible, I said. Claire was already walking back along our tracks, moving fast, verging on jogging. I followed. We retraced our steps for 10 minutes, 15, 20. The tracks were clear and continuous, stretching ahead of us in a straight line. And then we reached the campsite again, approached it from a different angle this time. But there it was. Impossible, but undeniable. Claire sat down hard on the ground. I don't understand. This doesn't make any sense. We must have gotten turned around, I said, though I knew that wasn't true. Let's try again, but this time we'll use the compass. We tried 3 more times, used the compass, followed our tracks, even tried walking in a completely different direction. Every time, within an hour, we ended up back at the campsite. The sun was setting when we gave up. We sat outside the RV, drinking water, neither of us speaking. Around us, the desert was silent and still. The woman in the canyon, Claire said finally. She said something about everyone who comes here, like there are others. So? So maybe there are. Maybe there are other people trapped here or whatever this is. Maybe they can help us. You want to go back to that canyon? To that door? Do you have a better idea? I didn't. As the last light faded, we prepared to spend another night in the RV. Claire wanted to try to fix the engine, but neither of us knew enough about vehicles to diagnose the problem, especially not in the dark. We ate a cold dinner and tried not to think about the signs, the impossible geography, the woman behind the door. As night fell, I found myself standing at the window, looking out at the original sign. The one that said, home, with an arrow pointing east. What if we followed it? I said. Claire came to stand beside me. Follow the sign? Just to see where it goes. If this place is some kind of loop or whatever, maybe the signs point to a way out. Or maybe they point to that canyon, to that door. Then we'll know, and we can make a different choice. Claire was quiet for a long time. Then, tomorrow, we'll try tomorrow, in the daylight. Tonight we stay locked in here. I agreed, and we went to bed. But sleep was elusive. I kept thinking about Maya, about how she'd disappeared in the forest and come back changed. How she'd never talked about where she'd been, no matter how much my parents begged or threatened. Around midnight, I heard footsteps outside, not sneaking or trying to hide, just footsteps, walking around the RV in a steady circle, around and around, crunching on the sandy soil. I lay frozen in bed, listening. Beside me, Claire was awake too. I could tell by her breathing. The footsteps continued for maybe 10 minutes. Then they stopped, and I heard the sound of something being scraped across metal. Long, drawn out, like nails on a chalkboard, but deeper. It was coming from the side of the RV, I got up, moving slowly, and crept to the window. In the moonlight, I could see a figure standing beside the vehicle. It was hard to make out details. The shadow seemed wrong somehow, like the person wasn't quite solid. They had something in their hand, something dark, which they were dragging along the RV's side. As I watched, they stepped away and moved toward the front of the vehicle. That's when I saw what they'd written on the side in something dark and wet. "Come home." The figure looked up at the window, at me. I couldn't see their face clearly, but I could see enough to know it was wrong. The proportions were off, like a bad mask. They raised their hand and waved. I stumbled backward, my hand fumbling for the light switch. When I flipped it on, flooding the interior with harsh fluorescent light, I looked back at the window. Nothing. No figure, no writing on the RV's side, just empty desert and moonlight. "What did you see?" Claire's voice was small, frightened. "I don't know." We kept the lights on for the rest of the night. Neither of us slept. We just sat at the dinette table, watching the windows, jumping at every small sound. When dawn came, we went outside to check the RV. No writing on the side, no signs that anyone had been near it. But in the dirt around the vehicle, there were footprints, dozens of them circling the RV again and again like someone had walked around it for hours. The prints were wrong, though. Too narrow, too long. Not quite human. "We follow the signs today," Claire said. "Whatever's at the end, it can't be worse than this." I wanted to argue, to suggest we try the road again, try anything except following those signs deeper into wherever we were. But I was too tired, too frightened, and out of ideas. We packed light, water, some food, a knife, my headlamp. Left everything else in the RV. If we didn't come back, at least someone would find our gear eventually and know we'd been here. The first sign was waiting, the one that said, "Home with the arrow." We followed it. The path took us in a different direction than the canyon, winding between rock formations and across stretches of open desert. Every 15 minutes or so, we'd find another sign. Almost home. Nearly there. Welcome. After about 2 hours, the landscape started to change. The rock formations grew taller, closer together, creating a labyrinth of narrow passages. The temperature seemed to drop, though the sun was still high overhead. And there were sounds, distant, echoing, that might have been wind but didn't quite sound like it. We came to a place where the path split. 2 signs, both pointing in different directions. "Left is home," one said. "Right is home," said the other. "This is insane," Claire said. "They're contradicting themselves." I looked at both paths. The left one led into a narrow canyon, dark and cool. The right one climbed up a rock face, disappearing around a bend. "Pick one," Claire said. I chose left. No particular reason, just instinct. The canyon was quiet and shadowed. As we walked, I noticed things carved into the walls. Not petroglyphs, these were newer, cruder. Words and symbols I didn't recognize. And names. Dozens of names, carved into the rock face. "Look at this," Claire said, stopping in front of a section of wall. Someone had carved an entire message: "Found home on 7/12/97, never leaving, John Parsons." Below it, in different handwriting, "John left us, went looking for the road. We told him, there's no road, there's only home, 7/19/97, and below that, found John, he understands now, 7/22/97. Jesus, I breathed. There were more, dozens of messages, spanning years. Some recent. I found one dated March 2024, all of them talking about finding home, about staying, about others who'd tried to leave and been brought back. "We need to get out of here," Claire said, backing away from the wall. "Right now." But before we could turn around, we heard it. Singing. That same children's song echoing through the canyon, but not from one voice, from many. Dozens of voices harmonizing, coming from deeper in the canyon. "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." The voices drew closer. We ran back the way we'd come, but the canyon seemed longer now, the turns unfamiliar. I didn't remember the path being this twisted. We emerged from the canyon into a clearing I didn't recognize, and standing in a circle around the clearing's perimeter were people. 20, maybe 30 of them, all facing inward, all singing. They wore ordinary clothes, hiking gear mostly, in various states of wear. Some looked clean and fresh, like they'd just arrived. Others were tattered and sun-bleached, but their faces, God, their faces. They were all smiling, the same smile stretched too wide, showing too many teeth. And they weren't quite right. The proportions were off, the features slightly distorted, like someone had tried to recreate human faces from memory and gotten it wrong. The singing stopped. They all turned to look at us. "Welcome home," they said in unison. Claire grabbed my hand, and we ran. I don't remember the details of the flight, just running, scrambling over rocks, sliding down embankments, following no path, just trying to get away from those smiling people and their empty eyes. We ran until we couldn't run anymore, until our lungs burned and our legs gave out. I collapsed against a rock formation, gasping, while Claire bent over with her hands on her knees. "What were they?" she managed between breaths. I didn't answer because I didn't want to think about what they were, or what they had been before they became whatever we'd seen. When I'd caught my breath enough to look around, I realized we were completely lost. Nothing looked familiar. The rock formations here were different, more vertical, like fingers reaching toward the sky. "We need to find the RV," Claire said. "We don't even know which direction it's in." "Then we'll pick a direction and walk until we find something. A road, a landmark, anything." We tried. We walked for hours until the sun started to set. And as the light faded, we began to see them. People, or things that had been people, standing motionless on top of rock formations, silhouetted against the darkening sky. Just standing there watching us. Never moving, never calling out, just watching. More of them appeared as darkness fell, standing in the spaces between rocks, emerging from shadows, always keeping their distance but always visible. Their numbers grew until we were surrounded by a silent, watching audience. They're hurting us, I realized. They're pushing us in a specific direction. Claire saw it too. Every time we tried to move away from a certain direction, more figures would appear, blocking the path. But when we moved the way they wanted us to go, the path would be clear. We had no choice. We went where they wanted us to go. It took maybe an hour of walking in the dark, stumbling over rocks we could barely see before we found it. A town, or the ruins of one. It emerged from the darkness like a hallucination. Wooden buildings, a main street, even a church with a crumbling steeple. Everything was old, abandoned, weathered by decades of wind and sun. But it wasn't quite right. The proportions were off, like the buildings had been constructed by someone who'd seen pictures of towns but never visited one. In the center of the street stood a sign, new and freshly painted. "Your home." "This is what the signs were leading to," Claire whispered. "This is home." The watchers had stopped following us, staying at the town's perimeter. They stood in a circle, silent and still, their faces lost in shadow. "What do we do?" I asked. "I don't know." We stood there in the middle of that impossible town, surrounded by those things that had once been people, with nowhere left to run. That's when I heard her. "Marcus." The voice came from one of the buildings. Young, familiar, impossible. "Maya?" My sister stepped out of the darkness, into the moonlight. She looked exactly as she had that summer she'd disappeared in the flat tops. 7 years old, wearing the same purple jacket, the same hiking boots. "I've been waiting," she said. "I knew you'd come home eventually. Everyone does." Claire's grip on my hand tightened. "Marcus, that's not... I know." The thing wearing my sister's face smiled. "It's nice here, you'll see. Everyone's so happy. No more worry, no more work. Just home. Forever." "What is this place?" I demanded. "It's where we belong. It's where we've always belonged. The swell has been here for so long, waiting, calling. Some people hear it and come. Others need to be shown. But everyone who's meant to be here finds it eventually. The people in the canyon, The messages carved in the rock. What happened to them? They came home. They understood. They're happy now. They're not people anymore. The Maya thing tilted its head. They're better than people, no pain, no fear, just home. Behind me, I heard movement. The watchers were getting closer, forming a tighter circle, cutting off any possible escape. You can't leave, Maya said, matter of fact. No one leaves home. But that's okay. You won't want to leave once you understand. Understand what? That this is where you were always meant to be. The swell has been dreaming of you. It saw you, Marcus, when you were here before. It tried to keep your sister, but she was too young, too small. It let her go and waited. It knew you'd come back. The watchers were closer now, maybe 10 feet away, their circle tightening. I could see their faces more clearly in the moonlight, and I wished I couldn't. They were definitely smiling. But the smiles were rigid, fixed, like they'd forgotten how to stop. Last chance, Maya said. Come home willingly, or we'll bring you home. Either way, you're staying. The watchers took a step forward, moving in unison, closing the circle. I looked at Claire. She looked back at me, and I saw in her eyes that she knew what I knew. This was it. There was no fighting, no running, no clever escape. We were going to become like them, join their ranks, stand in the desert for eternity wearing stolen faces and broken smiles. Unless. I pulled Claire close and whispered in her ear. She stiffened, started to shake her head, but I squeezed her hand. She closed her eyes, took a breath, and nodded. The watchers took another step. Okay, I said to Maya, to all of them. We'll stay. We'll be home. Maya's smile widened even further. I'm so glad. The watchers stopped moving, but they didn't retreat. Maya walked toward us, her arms outstretched for a hug I knew I'd never recover from. I pulled the knife from my belt. I've thought about this moment every day since, lying in this hospital bed. I don't know if what I did was right. I don't know if it made any difference in the end. But in that moment, with my sister's stolen face smiling at me and those things closing in, it was the only choice I could see. I grabbed Maya, or the thing pretending to be Maya, and I put the knife to its throat. It didn't seem afraid. It just looked confused, tilting its head like a curious dog. The watchers stopped, all of them frozen mid-step. Let us go, I said, or I kill her. You can't kill me, the Maya thing said calmly. I've been dead a long time. Then I'll destroy this body, and you'll need to find another one. For the first time, its smile faltered. Let us go, I repeated. Back to the RV, back to the road, or I'll make sure you have nothing left of her. The watchers looked at each other, though their heads didn't move. Some kind of communication passed between them, silent and instant. You'll come back, Maya said. Everyone comes back. The swell calls, and eventually, everyone listens. Maybe, but not tonight. Another pause. Then, slowly, the watchers began to retreat, stepping backward, opening a path through their circle. Go, Maya said. But remember, home is waiting. Home is always waiting. I didn't lower the knife until we'd backed out of the town, until the watchers were just silhouettes in the distance. Then I let go, and the Maya thing stood there, watching us disappear into the darkness. We ran. I don't know how we found the RV. Maybe the swell let us find it. Maybe we got lucky. Maybe some part of the landscape was still real enough to follow. But as the sun rose, painting the desert in shades of pink and gold, we stumbled into our campsite. The RV was there exactly as we'd left it, but all the signs were gone. Every single one. The engine started on the first try. We drove for the highway, following our original tire tracks, not speaking, barely breathing. And this time, the road stayed straight. This time, after an hour of driving, we saw the main road. We didn't stop until we reached Moab, didn't speak until we were standing in the hospital parking lot, watching the sun climb higher over the red rocks. Did that really happen? Claire asked. I didn't have an answer. The police drove out to the San Rafael swell, following our directions. They found the campsite, found our tire tracks. But no town, no door in the canyon wall, no signs. Just desert and rock and silence. They found the RV rental place, but Denny had never worked there. The owner, a woman named Patricia, said no one named Denny had ever been employed there, and their records showed she'd been the one who'd rented us the vehicle. The Winnebago was checked over by mechanics. Nothing wrong with it. Engine ran fine. No explanation for why it wouldn't start. Claire's satellite phone was examined. Battery was at 78%, fully functional. The police interviewed us separately, looked for drugs in our system, suggested carbon monoxide poisoning or shared delusion. They were polite but skeptical, the way you'd be polite to someone who's clearly unstable. Claire went back to Denver last week. She said she needed space to process, to think. She hasn't returned my calls. I'm still here in Moab, in this hospital bed, telling my story to anyone who'll listen. The doctors want to release me, say I'm physically healthy, that I should go home and talk to a therapist. But here's the thing they don't know, the thing I haven't told anyone. Yesterday, when I was sitting in the hospital cafeteria, I saw a sign through the window, posted on the far side of the parking lot, just visible between two parked cars. A wooden sign, weathered and old, with red painted letters. Come home. I walked outside to get a closer look, but by the time I reached the parking lot, it was gone. Just a telephone pole where I'd thought I'd seen the sign. But this morning, there was another one. On the corner I pass on my daily walk, and another one this afternoon, posted on a telephone pole near the grocery store. They're following me, or maybe they're leading me. I don't know anymore. I told the doctors I'm ready to be discharged. I said I want to go back to Colorado, back to my apartment, back to normal life. But that's a lie, because tonight, when I close my eyes, I can hear them singing, all those voices harmonizing in the darkness. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. And I know, the way you know things in dreams with absolute certainty, that eventually I'll follow the signs, not because I want to, but because the swell is patient. It's been waiting in the desert for centuries, maybe longer. It has time, and it knows that everyone who hears its call, who sees its signs, who touches even the edge of that place, they all come home eventually. All of them. The nurse just came by to check my vitals. She's new. I haven't seen her before. She smiled at me, and for just a moment, I thought the smile was too wide, the proportions slightly off. But then she moved, and it was just a normal smile, and I realized I was being paranoid. Still, I think I'll ask to stay another night. Just to be safe. Just to postpone the inevitable. Because I saw another sign this evening, right outside my window. It was gone when I blinked, but I saw it. It said, "Tomorrow, I don't know what that means, but I'm afraid I'm going to find out." The swell is calling, and I'm starting to think the only question isn't if I'll answer. It's how long I can resist before I do. Story 5. My name is Marcus Webb. I found my backpack lying beside a tree in the White Mountains of New Hampshire, but I'd never left it. We'd driven up from Boston in late September, me and my girlfriend Claire, in her father's old RV. The plan was simple. Spend a week at the Pemigewasset campground, do some hiking, disconnect from our phones, maybe work through some things. We'd been arguing a lot, small stuff mostly, the kind of tensions that build up when you've been together 3 years and neither of you wants to admit you're stuck. The campground was half empty that time of year. Most of the families had cleared out after Labor Day, leaving just the retirees in their massive rigs and a handful of younger couples like us. We got a spot near the edge where the tree line started. Claire liked it because it felt more private. I didn't care either way. The first 2 days were fine. We hiked the Flume Trail, took photos we'd probably never look at again, ate sandwiches by the river. Claire seemed lighter up here, away from her job. She worked in pharmaceutical sales and hated it but couldn't quit because the money was too good. I taught high school history, which she said was noble but secretly thought was beneath her. We didn't talk about any of this directly. On the third morning, I decided to go for a solo hike while Claire slept in. She'd had too much wine the night before and wanted to rest. I took my blue Osprey backpack, the one with the torn shoulder strap I kept meaning to fix, and headed up the Lafayette Place Trail. It wasn't a difficult hike, maybe 3 miles each way, but steep enough to feel like exercise. I made good time. The weather was perfect, cool and clear, with that sharp autumn light that makes everything look like a postcard. I saw maybe 4 other hikers the whole way up. At the summit, I ate an energy bar, drank some water, and started back down around 11. That's when I saw it. About a 1/4 mile from the trailhead, maybe 50 feet off the path, there was my backpack. Same blue Osprey, same torn shoulder strap. Propped against the base of a white birch tree, zippers closed, sitting upright like someone had carefully placed it there. I stopped walking. The thing was, my backpack was on my shoulders. I could feel the weight of it, the water bottle shifting inside when I turned. I slipped it off and held it in front of me, looking at the torn strap, then looked back at the one by the tree. They were identical. I stood there for maybe 2 minutes, just staring. The forest was quiet except for some birds and the distant sound of the stream. No one else was on the trail. I walked over to the tree, slowly, like the backpack might suddenly move or disappear. It didn't. I knelt down next to it. The zippers were dusty, like it had been there for a while, but when I touched the fabric, it felt dry. No morning dew, no dirt. I unzipped the main compartment. Inside was the same stuff I had in my pack. Energy bars, same brand. A red Nalgene bottle, half full. A first aid kit in a clear plastic bag. A rolled-up rain jacket. Even the receipt I'd shoved in the side pocket from the gas station in Lincoln. Same date, same items, same total. I sat back on my heels and looked around. There was no one. No sound of anyone approaching. The backpack by the tree wasn't old or weathered. It looked like it had just been set down. I opened my own pack again, checking the contents. Everything was still there. Same energy bars, same receipt, same everything. I had 2 identical backpacks with identical contents, and no explanation for how that was possible. I left the second one there. I don't know why I didn't take it with me or at least move it or tell someone. I just zipped it back up, put my own pack on, and walked quickly back to the campground. My hands were shaking when I got to the RV. Claire was awake, sitting outside in one of our folding chairs, reading a book. She looked up when I approached. "You okay?" she asked. "You look weird." "I'm fine," I said. "Just tired." She went back to her book. I didn't tell her about the backpack. I'm not sure why. Maybe because I knew how it would sound. Maybe because I didn't want her to think I was losing it. We'd been on edge enough already without me adding paranoia to the mix. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the pack by the tree, trying to come up with some rational explanation. Someone had the same model and coincidentally lost it? But what about the contents? The receipt? I got up around 2 in the morning and checked my pack again, just to make sure everything was still there. It was. Claire stirred in the bed above the cabin. "Marcus?" "Just getting water," I said. "Come back to bed." I did, but I didn't sleep. The next morning, I told Claire I wanted to do the same hike again. She said she'd come with me this time. I didn't want her to, but I couldn't think of a good reason to say no without explaining why. We set out around 9. The weather had turned cloudy, cooler. Claire walked ahead of me most of the way, which was normal. She always set a faster pace. I kept watching the sides of the trail, looking for the spot where I'd seen the backpack. I found it. The second pack was still there, in the exact same position against the birch tree. Claire walked right past it without noticing. I stopped. "Claire." She turned around. "What?" I pointed. "Do you see that?" She looked where I was pointing, then back at me. "See what?" "The backpack, right there, against that tree." She squinted. "I don't see anything." "Claire, it's right there. Blue Osprey pack, it looks just like mine." She walked back to where I was standing and stared into the trees. After a moment, she shook her head. "Marcus, there's nothing there." "You're telling me you don't see a backpack against that tree?" I'm telling you, there's no backpack there. I walked off the trail toward the tree. She followed me, sighing. When I got to the spot, the pack was right where I'd left it. I pointed down at it. You're saying you don't see this? Claire looked at the ground, then at me. Her expression changed. Marcus, what's going on? There's a backpack right here. I'm looking at it. Are you seriously telling me you can't see it? There's nothing there. I bent down and put my hand on it. The fabric was real, solid. I picked it up. I'm holding it right now. Claire's face went pale. She took a step back. You're not holding anything. I looked down. I could feel the weight of the pack in my hands, see the blue fabric, the torn strap. I held it out toward her. Take it. She didn't move. Marcus, your hands are empty. I don't know how long we stood there. Eventually, she convinced me to come back to the trail. I put the second backpack down again exactly where I'd found it, and we finished the hike without talking. Claire kept glancing at me like I might collapse or run off into the woods. When we got back to the campground, she suggested we pack up and leave early. I told her I was fine, that maybe I was just dehydrated or tired. She didn't believe me, but she dropped it. That afternoon, while Claire was in the shower block, I went back to the trail. I had to see if the backpack was still there, if I could still see it. I needed to know I wasn't hallucinating. It was there. I picked it up again, opened it, checked the contents. Everything was the same. I sat down next to the tree and tried to think clearly. Either this was real and something impossible was happening, or I was having some kind of breakdown. Both options were terrifying. I noticed something I hadn't seen before. In the small front pocket of the backpack, there was a folded piece of paper. I pulled it out and opened it. It was a note written in handwriting that looked like mine, but wasn't quite right. The letters were shakier, more cramped. It said, "Don't go back to the campground." I read it 3 times. The paper was regular notebook paper, slightly yellowed, like it had been folded for a while. I checked my own backpack. There was no matching note. I folded the paper back up and put it in my pocket. Then I stood up and walked back to the campground faster than I'd walked on the trail. Claire was back at the RV, making dinner. She smiled when she saw me, trying to act normal. Feeling better? Yeah, I said. I think I just needed some air. We ate pasta and drank cheap red wine. Claire talked about maybe driving down to Portland for the weekend, doing something different. I nodded along but wasn't really listening. I kept thinking about the note, about the handwriting that was almost but not quite mine. That night something woke me up around 3 a.m. A sound outside the RV like footsteps on gravel. I lay there in the dark, listening. Claire was asleep above me, breathing heavily. The footsteps circled the RV slowly, deliberately. They stopped near the door. I got up quietly and looked through the small window. In the faint moonlight, I could see someone standing about 20 feet away, near the tree line. They were wearing dark clothes and had a backpack on, blue osprey, torn shoulder strap. The person turned toward the RV. I couldn't see their face clearly, but their build was similar to mine. Same height, same posture. They stood there for maybe 30 seconds, then walked back into the trees. I checked the door lock twice, then sat at the small table, too wired to go back to sleep. I kept the lights off. In the morning, Claire asked if I'd slept okay. I said yes. She said she'd heard me moving around but figured I just needed to use the bathroom. We had coffee and instant oatmeal and didn't talk about much. Around 10, a park ranger knocked on our door. Young guy, maybe 25, with a neat beard and a friendly smile. He asked if we'd seen anything unusual in the past few days. Claire glanced at me. Like what? I asked. We've had some reports of someone camping illegally in the backcountry, off-trail. Sometimes they come into the established campgrounds at night. We're just trying to track them down. I haven't seen anyone, Claire said. The ranger looked at me. What about you, sir? I hesitated. No, nothing unusual. He nodded, thanked us, and moved on to the next site. Claire closed the door and turned to me. You saw something last night. I thought I did. It was probably nothing. Marcus, what's going on with you? I don't know. She sat down across from me. Do you want to go home? I thought about it. The note had said not to go back to the campground, but I was already at the campground. Maybe it meant something else, or maybe I was reading too much into a note I'd possibly written myself during some kind of dissociative episode. Let's stay, I said. I'll be fine. Claire didn't look convinced, but she didn't push it. That afternoon, I went back to the trail for the third time. I didn't tell Claire. She'd gone into North Conway to get groceries and said she'd be back in a few hours. I had time. The second backpack was gone. I searched the area around the birch tree, thinking maybe an animal had dragged it off or someone had finally taken it. But there was no sign of it anywhere. I widened my search, going deeper into the trees, but found nothing. On my way back down the trail, I ran into another hiker. Older woman, maybe 60, with expensive gear and a confident stride. She nodded as we passed each other. "Excuse me," I said. "Did you happen to see a backpack on the trail? Blue Osprey?" She stopped. "Where?" "Off the trail a bit, near a birch tree." She thought about it. "No, I didn't see anything like that. You lose yours?" I touched the straps of my own pack, still on my shoulders. "No, just curious." She gave me an odd look and kept walking. When I got back to the RV, Claire's car was already there. She was sitting outside with another woman I didn't recognize. They were drinking coffee and talking. Claire waved me over. "Marcus, this is Diane." She's parked a few sites down. Diane was probably in her 50s with short gray hair and sharp eyes. She shook my hand firmly. "Claire was just telling me you folks are from Boston." "That's right," I said. "Beautiful up here this time of year," Diane said, "though it can get strange." Claire laughed. "Strange how?" Diane shrugged. "Just the usual mountain weirdness. People see things, hear things. The forest plays tricks when you're tired." I felt Claire's eyes on me, but didn't look at her. "What kind of things?" I asked. "Oh, you know, lights in the woods, sounds that don't match up. Sometimes people report seeing themselves." "Seeing themselves?" Diane sipped her coffee. "It's a psychological thing, I think. You're alone out there, tired, maybe a little dehydrated. Your brain fills in gaps, creates patterns. I read about it in a hiking magazine once." "Have you ever experienced it?" Claire asked. "Once," Diane said. "Years ago. I was hiking solo up in the Presidentials and could have sworn I saw my own jacket hanging from a tree branch ahead of me. But when I got closer, it was just a torn piece of tarp. The color was completely different, but my brain had insisted it was my jacket." "Weird," Claire said. "The mind is weird," Diane agreed. She stood up. "Anyway, I should let you folks get back to your evening. Nice meeting you both." After she left, Claire turned to me. "You want to tell me what's really going on?" I told her everything. The backpack, the note, the figure I'd seen outside the RV. She listened without interrupting, her expression neutral. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. "Okay," she finally said. "Okay? I believe that you saw something. Or think you saw something. But Marcus, this is starting to scare me. It's scaring me too. Maybe we should go to a doctor when we get back, just to check. Make sure everything's okay." I nodded. "Yeah, maybe." That night, neither of us slept well. Every sound outside made me tense. Claire tossed and turned above me. Around midnight, I heard the footsteps again. This time, I didn't get up to look. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling of the RV, listening to them circle us slowly. In the morning, there were footprints in the dirt around the RV. Boot prints, size 10 or 11, same size I wore. I took photos with my phone before Claire saw them, then scuffed them out with my foot. We spent the day in town killing time. Claire wanted to keep me around people, I think. We had lunch at a diner, walked through some antique shops, bought things we didn't need. It felt like we were play-acting normalcy. When we got back to the campground in the late afternoon, I noticed something immediately. There was a second RV parked in the empty spot next to ours. It was the exact same model as Claire's father's RV. Same year, same color, same dent in the back panel where he'd backed into a post 5 years ago. I stopped walking. Claire followed my gaze. Huh. Same RV. That's not just the same model, I said. Look at the license plate. She looked. The plate was identical to ours down to the number. That's impossible, Claire said. There can't be two vehicles with the same plate. There can't be two of a lot of things, I said. We walked over to it slowly. The RV's curtains were drawn. I knocked on the door. No answer. I tried the handle. Locked. Maybe it's a coincidence, Claire said, but her voice was shaky. Maybe someone ordered a custom plate that happened to match. With the same dent? She didn't answer. We went back to our own RV. Claire wanted to call the ranger, report it, but I talked her out of it. What would we say? That someone had an RV that looked like ours? It wasn't illegal. It was just impossible. That night, I lay awake again, waiting. The footsteps came around 2 a.m., but this time they stopped at the other RV. I heard the door open and close. Then silence. In the morning, the second RV was gone. There were tire tracks in the dirt where it had been parked, but no other sign it had ever existed. Claire was convinced we'd both imagined it, that we were feeding into each other's paranoia. I didn't argue with her. We packed up that morning and drove back to Boston. Neither of us talked much during the drive. When we got to her apartment, I helped unload the RV, and then I went home to my own place. We'd been planning to spend the night together, but neither of us suggested it. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, things have been different. Claire and I broke up. It was mutual, sort of. We both knew something had broken between us on that trip, though we couldn't name what. She's seeing a therapist now. She told me she's been having dreams about the White Mountains, about hiking trails that loop back on themselves endlessly. I haven't told her what I found when I got home. In my closet, pushed to the back behind my winter coats, there was a blue Osprey backpack, torn shoulder strap, dusty zippers. I opened it. Inside were energy bars, a red Nalgene bottle, a first aid kit, and a rolled-up rain jacket. There was also a note in the front pocket. It said, "Don't go back to the campground," but it was in Claire's handwriting. I put the backpack in my car trunk. I haven't opened it again. Sometimes, late at night, I think about driving back up to the White Mountains, finding that birch tree, seeing if there are more. Part of me thinks they'll keep multiplying, that every time I go back there will be another pack waiting. The worst part isn't the impossibility of it. The worst part is that I'm starting to forget which backpack was mine to begin with. When I look at the one I still use, the one I carried on that hike, I can't shake the feeling that it's not the original, that maybe I've been carrying the wrong one this whole time. I've been having dreams too. In them, I'm hiking the Lafayette Place Trail, but the path keeps splitting. Each fork looks identical, and no matter which way I choose, I end up at the same birch tree. And every time, there's someone standing there with their back to me wearing a blue backpack. They never turn around. Last week I got a text from Claire. Just 3 words. "I found mine." I didn't respond. I don't know what she means, and I'm afraid to ask. Yesterday I drove back up to the White Mountains. I don't know why. Maybe because I needed to know if the backpack was still there or if there were more now. Maybe because some part of me thinks that if I can just figure out where the first one came from, I can make sense of this. The campground was almost empty. October was winding down and the weather had turned cold. I didn't bring the RV this time, just drove up in my car and parked at the trailhead. I started hiking around 3 p.m. The birch tree was easy to find. I'd memorized the location, counted my steps from the trailhead marker. When I got there, I stopped. There were 4 backpacks now, all blue Ospreys, all with torn shoulder straps, arranged in a neat line against the base of the tree, zippers closed, sitting upright. I walked up to them slowly. The forest was completely silent. No birds, no wind, nothing. I knelt down and opened the first one. Same contents as before. I opened the second. Same. The third. The fourth. In the front pocket of the 4th backpack, there was a note. I pulled it out with shaking hands and unfolded it. The handwriting was mine again, but neater than the first note. More deliberate. It said, "Stop looking. You're making it worse." I heard footsteps behind me. I turned. There was someone standing about 30 feet away, partially hidden by the trees. They were wearing dark clothes and had a blue backpack on their shoulders. Torn strap. They were watching me. I stood up slowly. "Who are you?" They didn't answer. They just stood there, perfectly still. "What do you want?" "Nothing." I took a step toward them. They took a step back, maintaining the distance between us. I stopped. "Is this you doing this?" I asked. "The backpacks. The RV. Is this you?" They tilted their heads slightly, like they were considering the question. Then they turned and walked deeper into the woods. Not quickly, not running. Just walking, steady and deliberate. I followed. I know I shouldn't have. I know that's exactly what you're not supposed to do in situations like this. But I needed answers. I needed to understand what was happening to me. The figure moved through the trees easily, never stumbling, never hesitating. I had to work to keep up. We went off trail, deeper into the forest, past landmarks I didn't recognize. The light was fading. I checked my phone. 4:30 p.m. I'd been walking for maybe 10 minutes, but it felt longer. The figure stopped in a small clearing. I stopped too, keeping my distance. They stood with their back to me for a long moment, then slowly turned around. I couldn't see their face clearly in the dim light, but I could see enough. The build, the height, the way they stood. I was looking at myself, not similar to me, not a close resemblance. Me, they, he, raised one hand in a small wave, then he pointed behind me. I turned around. I was back at the trailhead parking lot. My car was right there, 20 feet away. The sun was setting. According to my phone, it was 6:15 p.m. I'd lost almost 2 hours. I got in my car and drove back to Boston without stopping. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the steering wheel. I kept checking the rearview mirror, expecting to see my own face staring back at me from the back seat. When I got home, there was a package on my doorstep. No return address. No postage. Just my name written in handwriting I recognized. Inside was a blue Osprey backpack. I brought it inside and opened it. Same contents as all the others. But this time, there were 2 notes in the front pocket. I opened the first one. It said, "You should have stopped when you had the chance." The second note was longer. The handwriting was shakier, harder to read. It said, "I don't know how many of us there are now. I stopped counting at 12. Every time one of us goes back, it creates another. We're stuck in a loop, and I don't think there's a way out. I'm writing this from the campground. I've been here for 3 weeks, and every morning, I wake up to find another version of myself sleeping in the woods. They're getting closer. Some of them don't look right anymore. I think the forest is changing us. I think it wants something. If you're reading this, don't try to find me. Don't go back. Just forget about the backpack, forget about the trail, forget about all of it. It's too late for me, but maybe it's not too late for you. Maybe you can still..." The note ended mid-sentence. The last few words were smudged, like the pen had been dropped. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, staring at the notes. Then I took out my phone and pulled up Claire's number. I started typing a text, then deleted it. What could I possibly say? Instead, I went to my closet and pulled out all the backpacks I could find. 3 of them now, not counting the one I'd just brought in. 4 total. I laid them out on my living room floor and opened each one. They all had notes, different messages, different handwriting, but all versions of the same warning. Don't go back. Stop looking. It's too late. You're making it worse. The last note was different. It was written on the back of a photo. The photo showed a man standing alone in the White Mountains next to a birch tree. He was smiling. It took me a moment to recognize him. It was me, but older, maybe 10 years older, gray in the hair, lines around the eyes. On the back, in my handwriting, it said, "I'm sorry. I thought I could fix it." My phone buzzed. Text from Claire. I'm at the campground. Where are you? I stared at the message, felt my stomach drop, typed back, Claire, get out of there now. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then, it's too late. I see them. See who? All of us. I called her. It went straight to voicemail. I called again. Same thing. I grabbed my keys. I'm driving back up to the White Mountains right now. It's almost midnight. I know I shouldn't. I know it's exactly what the notes told me not to do. But Claire is there, and I can't just leave her. I keep seeing headlights in my rearview mirror that disappear when I look directly at them. Twice now I've passed cars on the highway that look exactly like mine. Same make, model, color. Same dent in the passenger door from where I hit a shopping cart last year. The backpack is on the passenger seat next to me. I can see it out of the corner of my eye. I'm afraid to look at it directly, afraid that if I do, I'll see someone sitting there wearing it. My phone just buzzed again. Text from my own number. Turn around, you can't help her. I didn't send that text. I'm not turning around. I'm almost at the campground now. I can see the exit sign ahead. My phone is buzzing constantly. Texts from numbers I don't recognize, from Claire's number, from my own number. I'm not reading them. I just realized something. The backpack on the passenger seat has a note sticking out of the front pocket. I didn't put it there. I'm pulling over to read it. It says, by the time you read this, you'll already be one of us. Welcome to the trail. It only goes one direction now. I can see the campground entrance ahead. There are lights in the woods, dozens of them moving between the trees. Flashlights or headlamps, too many for the handful of people who would be camping this late in the season. I'm getting out of the car. I can see someone standing at the edge of the parking lot watching me. They're wearing dark clothes and have a blue backpack on. They're waving. I'm waving back. I don't remember deciding to wave back. I'm walking toward them. The trees are closer than they should be. Claire is calling my name from somewhere in the woods. Or maybe it's not Claire. It sounds like her voice, but it's coming from multiple directions at once. There are more people now, standing in the trees, all of them with backpacks, all of them watching. I can see my car in the parking lot behind me. There's someone sitting in the driver's seat. I can't see their face, but I can see their backpack. I'm trying to turn around. I can't turn around. The trail is right in front of me now. I don't remember walking to the trailhead. Someone is standing next to the marker, holding a flashlight. When the light catches their face, I see myself. But wrong. The eyes are too wide. The smile is too fixed. They're handing me something. Another note. It says, there's always room for one more. I'm taking the note. I'm folding it up. I'm putting it in my pocket. I'm walking up the trail. Claire is walking beside me. When did she get here? She's not saying anything. Neither am I. We're just walking. There are others on the trail ahead of us, all walking in the same direction, all with blue backpacks. I can't remember why I came here. I can't remember when I left. The birch tree is ahead. I can see it in the darkness. There are backpacks arranged around it in a circle. Too many to count. Someone is standing in the center of the circle. They're back to us. They're turning around. I can't look at their face. I'm looking at their face. My name is Marcus Webb. I found my backpack lying beside a tree in the White Mountains of New Hampshire, but I'd never left it. We'd driven up from Boston in late September, me and my girlfriend Claire in her father's old RV. The plan was simple. Spend a week at the Pemigewasset campground, do some hiking, disconnect from our phones, maybe work through some things. The first 2 days were fine. On the third morning, I decided to go for a solo hike while Claire slept in. I'm writing this note and leaving it in the backpack. If you find it, don't go back to the campground. Don't follow the trail. Don't look for us. We're already here. We've always been here. The forest doesn't let you leave. It just keeps making more of you until you forget which one you were to begin with. I can see myself writing this note from across the clearing. I can see myself reading it. I can see myself leaving it by the tree. I can see myself finding it. All at once. All the time. There is no before or after anymore. There is only the trail and the tree and the backpack and us. All of us. Every version that ever came looking. Every version that ever tried to understand. We're still here. We'll always be here. And if you're reading this, so are you. My name is Marcus Webb. I found my backpack lying beside a tree, but I'd never left it.